Good evening, everyone. My name is Peter Leitch, and I'm the chair of the Motion Picture Production Industry Association of BC. I'd like to welcome you on behalf of the MPPIA Board of Directors and our members to our town hall session to reflect back on this past year and as we collectively manage through this pandemic and what lies ahead in 2021. I would like to start by acknowledging and thanking the Coast Salish people whose traditional territory I reside and work. I would like to express our gratitude to the Squamish Nation and Tsleil-Waututh Nation and the value of the opportunity to learn, live, and share educational experiences on this traditional territory. As we near the end of 2020 and start to slow down for the holidays, it's an understatement to say that it's been an extraordinary year. The record pace of business we were experiencing less than a year ago met head on with the full stop in all economic activity brought on by the global pandemic. BC's production community took all necessary measures to pause our work, manage our safety, public health authorities, and eventually collaborate on the economic recovery of our industry. While this health emergency stopped us in our tracks, one of the silver linings of the disruption was the forced pause and examination of how we work. Our unexpected and sudden work stoppage allowed us to take some time to scrutinize, evaluate, and collaboratively strategize on our most important priorities around safety, workforce development, community environmental initiatives, and in particular, the groundswell of motivation for equity, diversity, and inclusion. Priorities gained some real momentum. As we're gathering tonight as an industry for the fifth and final MPPIA Town Hall panel of 2020, I want to express my appreciation and admiration for everyone across our industry. It's been a tough year, but we are still able to move forward as a community, get our jobs done, and be an important part of the economic recovery in BC. Our partners in government play an important role in our industry. Play a very important role in our industry. We had a great debt of gratitude to the Premier, those who lead us in public health, and of course, our closest collaboration, the Ministry of Tourism, Arts, Culture, and Sports, as well as the leadership of Creative BC. We are lucky to have all represented on this evening panel. Before I move on to introduce our panelists and special guests representing our provincial government, I want to take a moment to thank Western Economic Diversification for providing funding this year that supported our priorities and activities through the unique challenges of the year. We have a great panel with varied experiences here this evening. Each panelist will share their thoughts on the year about our industry, their role, and personal perspectives. At the end of all the presentations, we will do a Q&A from questions that were submitted by the audience in advance. Our panelists this evening are Creative BC CEO Prem Gill, Provincial Film Commissioner at Creative BC, Marnie G, producer with LARK Productions, CMPA, Erin Haskett, Special Effects Coordinator, AATSE 891, James Parody, First AD, DGCBC, Patrice Leong, Producer, Lily Huey, and Director, DGCBC, Zach Lepofsky. Now I'm pleased to introduce BC's Minister of Tourism, Arts, Culture, and Sport, the Honourable Melanie Mark, and Parliamentary Secretary, Bob Deeth. Both are great supporters of the creative sector, so we're lucky to have the opportunity to work with them both over the next 4 years. I'd like to now pass it on to Minister Mark.
Great, thank you, Peter. Hi, everyone. Simgaget, Sigidamanak, Gibit Wiltsik. I'm very proud to be BC's new Minister for Tourism, Arts, Culture, and Sport, and I'd like to acknowledge the work of my colleague, Minister Lisa Baer, and my colleague who you'll be hearing from shortly, Parliamentary Secretary Bob Deeth. I'm sending greetings from the traditional territory of the Lekwungen-speaking peoples, members of the Esquimalt and Songhees First Nations. I'm at the legislature, and it's my honor to be taking part in this kind of final installment. Peter, you said what a year it's been, and we're still in it. And it's been a hard year. There's no question. I just really want to affirm that. I know when I first learned of COVID and what I had to do with my former Ministry of Advanced Education, Skills and Training, that I had to turn things around, and everyone has been building the plane as we go. But I guess I just want to share as an introduction, as a new minister, some values that I think are really important to me. It's a steep learning curve right now that I'm transitioning from my former role to this role, but I'm the first First Nations woman to ever get elected in BC. It's history, and the first First Nations woman to serve in cabinet. And I grew up in the projects. So I hope that says something about resilience and self-determination. And I will bring those values to work every day. I also played rugby, so I'm a team player. I will work with everyone, and I value that. Yes, COVID forced us to work in different ways, to collaborate in different ways, and COVID is not behind us. But I think the lessons of paddling together, working together, you'll hear me talk about the triple word score, which is for the Scrabble players, just the use of just taking a difficult circumstances and coming together. And I heard that your industry did that. And that's what's helped you be successful and resilient. The unions, health, industry, government, studios, everyone collaborating on what works, and also learning to set aside what doesn't. As minister, my goal is to help you stay on the map, which is why the map of BC is behind us. Hollywood North, it's all about the props. Hollywood North is here. I'm gonna work with you to help you stay on the map, keep shining, and to also bring, what is important to me as I learn about the sector when we think about film and we think about escaping and learning and connecting and crying and being inspired and using our imaginations and all of the things, the magic that film can bring to us, whether that shines a light on something that we never even really cared about, or it took us away from what our crazy days look like. I think I just want to acknowledge the work and just pause for a moment as you kind of end the year. You are a shining success in the middle of this pandemic across the industry, and you're going to be important to recovery, our economic recovery. And the final thing I'll say as I pass it on to my colleague, we're in the people business. You're in the people business, I'm in the people business. And when we talk about the talent, again, a value for me is really lifting people up. And that is for them to train here, live here, raise their families here, because that's good for everyone. So thank you for the opportunity. Have a great panel.
Thanks, Melanie. Thank you very much, Peter and Melanie for that. And good evening, everyone. I'm speaking to you, I'm Bob Deeth. I'm speaking to you from the Katzie and Kwantlen First Nations. And I'm really proud to be presenting from this First Nations territory. And I'm really, really passionate about, anyone who knows me, I'm really passionate about the creative sector, and being an entertainment lawyer and a musician, and in another life working with the creative industries with Music BC, and helping to form Creative BC when I was at Music BC. So I have a vested interest in success in the creative industries, but as Minister Mark said, when the pandemic hit this spring, I was asked by the Premier to work primarily with the music sector, and I heard what they were doing to have to adapt, and we were able to change Amplify BC, or adapt Amplify BC, and to meet their needs. And that's part of what I want to echo what the minister is saying. We're here to listen, and we're here to be nimble in a very difficult situation and meet your needs. And we've been trying really, really hard to do that. And I look forward to working with Minister Mark as the Parliamentary Secretary for Arts and Film. This is actually a new role, and it really speaks to the importance that the Premier, our government, has for the creative industries, in particular film, television, and of course the booming streaming sector. Just so everybody knows, I got a mandate letter from the Premier to work with the Minister, and there's really been tasked with two things. The first thing is to work with the creative sector to identify strategies to drive a strong recovery from the impacts of COVID-19. And this will include launching, of course, the important Domestic Motion Picture Fund that will help us leverage federal funds and other funds, and of course, advocate for more access to federal funds to support the BC creators. Of course, work hard to try to look at renewing Amplify BC on the music side and other creative industries, and also working with industry partners such as MPPIA and IATSE and CMPA and Directors Guild and many other people on this call to advance equity, diversity, and inclusion in these industries, which I know many of you embrace. The second part is to support the Minister of Finance to reestablish a government film sector task force. And what we're doing is we're going to look at the size and term of a new visual effects tax credit based on production costs, which I think is obviously different than the labor cost model. So I think we have a lot of work to do that. And I'm really looking forward to that work. And I know it's been challenging for everyone, but I was blown away. I live out in Maple Ridge, and just seeing the production back strong, it's really wonderful to see. And I know how collaborative and resilient the industry is. And so, you know, I know as the minister said, we're not through the pandemic yet, but, you know, we're really making great progress together. And every day people and businesses are working hard to get back on track. And so we want to be here for you. And we really, really look forward to continuing to work with you. And part of that, of course, is the wonderful work of Creative BC. And I'd love to pass the baton over to Prem Gill, the CEO, and she has a few words. So thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you very much, and good evening. I'm speaking to you tonight from my home located in the unceded territories of the Coast Salish people, the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish. My family has lived on these territories and settled here since the 1960s, and I'm very proud to have been the first person born in these territories. I'm also very pleased, and thank you so much for your kind words, to offer a warm welcome to Minister Mark and to Minister Melanie Mark and Parliamentary Secretary Bob Deeth in their new roles within the Ministry of Tourism, Arts, Culture, and Sport. This town hall is an important time to facilitate a first direct connection for both of you with hundreds of talented creators, business owners, crew, and craftspeople who make BC's motion picture industry work, even during extreme times like this. As we look back at 2020, what we see in the rear view is a phenomenal amount of collaboration, understanding, trust, and support between BC's government and the motion picture industry, between the people who are working hands-on every day, and especially as we continue to find our way back together during this pandemic. Making this happen is not easy, far from it, and we know that every individual member of this workforce is enabling this very complex industry to intelligently and safely sustain its return to production within the constraints that seemed insurmountable this past spring. Yet somehow we are closing 2020 together, reflecting on how the BC motion picture industry has been able to navigate COVID-19 in its signature collaborative way, and together raise its jurisdiction to earn the competitive reputation as the best place for production in North America right now. And furthermore, during this time, to continue transforming the industry, advancing and growing it to a $3.2 billion industry, while maintaining responsibilities to communities, the environment, and social change. Like giving back to the food bank through Real Thanksgiving Challenge with over $212,000 raised for the food bank this past year. It's incredible. Congratulations to those of you who participated in that. And like improving environmental practices through Real Green, which trained 2.5 times more crew in 2020 than the prior year, all of whom are implementing cleaner practices through every aspect of production. And like doing the work, undertaking the learning about anti-racism, decolonization, inclusion, and reflecting on how to expand opportunities in the industry through greater understanding of culture, different abilities, and equity in order to expand the workforce capacity, expand the diversity within the industry, and meet the incredible demand for BC crews and talent that remains a fact even during COVID. Between 60 and 70,000 people, from production companies to sets to studios to supply companies, faced the unknowns, made plans together, and put the industry back in motion. As the Provincial Film Commission, Creative BC helped to facilitate the industry's incredible lift. Thank you to the Minister and Parliamentary Secretary for pointing the way forward. The look ahead is positive, and it is to build back better. This is possible through partnership, as you've both noted, between industry and government, and very much because of this industry's incredible stamina, coupled with a sense of humanity and responsibility to one another, to community, to the planet, and to society. And I would like to, it is my great pleasure to introduce you to Marnie G, who's been on the ground with many of you through this period, the Provincial Film Commissioner and Director of Production Services here at Creative BC.
I can't believe it. 700 Zoom calls and we can still forget to unmute ourselves. Thanks so much, Prem. And thank you so much for your leadership in these past 9 months. And obviously prior to that, with leading the organization through this crazy year. My name is Marnie G. I'm the Director of Production Services and the BC Film Commissioner at Creative BC. And I'm joining you here tonight from the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Coast Salish peoples, Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Musqueam First Nations. And with this acknowledgement, I would like to thank the Indigenous people who still live on and care for the lands. Following up Minister Mark, Parliament Secretary Bob Eath, Prem Gill, I'm just going to pass it back over. I timed myself a couple of times today. It was interesting, Peter saying, sharing our thoughts. I'd be here for 5 hours. So I'm just going to take a very brief few moments with my time. I'm really excited to listen to the panelists from production, my fellow panelists. So to say a huge thank you. The one word for sure that other than unprecedented that we continue to hear is collaboration. We hear it all the time about British Columbia prior to COVID-19, but it certainly was the common thread in terms of our return to safe operations and all of the hard work that went into that. So I just want to say a very quick thank you to everyone. And when I mean everyone is the production industry in the province. So I'm going to start with our provincial government. Huge thanks to our Ministry of Tourism, Arts, Culture and Sport, to the Ministry of Health for all of their time in speaking with us over the last 9 months as we return to production, all the many Zoom calls, text, emails, etc. Lots of in-depth questions about how to return safely, our health and safety protocols. They continue to take time to speak with us and we're very grateful for that. Also to WorkSafe BC, all of the time they've spent with us in designing our pandemic production guide and BC's COVID-19 safety guide for motion picture. They continue to work with us in that as well in that space. Huge thanks to our labor organizations and the business representatives that have been obviously integral in terms of the guides, the return to work, the questions, making sure that we have protocols that are health and safety protocols that are top notch and again have returned us to safe operations and at levels of productions we've never seen before. And you know, Parliamentary Secretary Bob Eath spoke about the communities. Well, the communities, the municipal film offices and municipalities that have welcomed production back into their communities has been huge. We couldn't do it without them. It's certainly an all hands on deck. And again, just, you know, there's so many people and organizations that that help make production thrive in BC. So I want to say thank you to them. Our regional film commissions throughout the province, they've been a very, very important part of the process of returning to safe operations as we see production out throughout the Lower Mainland, but obviously on Vancouver Island and throughout the province of British Columbia. So I wanted to thank them. To the studios, obviously in Los Angeles and here in British Columbia for their support as we maneuvered through all these questions and complications and came out the other side. And CMPA and our domestic production, our Commercial Producers Association of Western Canada. And also finally to MPPIA for all their support and the partnership that we have with them. And just a quick shout out to our Film Commission team and the team at Creative BC that has spent a lot of time on the phone, talking to people, making sure that we're supporting the community, we're supporting production as we return to safe operations. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Erin Haskett with LARK Productions, and thank you very much.
Hi everyone, I'm Erin Haskett. I'm with LARK Productions. I'm an executive producer here based in Vancouver. And for those of you that don't know our company, We're a Canadian-controlled company that produces both scripted and unscripted programming, and NBC and International also own a minority stake in our company. I'm also the chair of the CMPA Board of Directors. I really want to thank MPIA for inviting me today, and also to Minister Mark for joining us, and everyone that's spoken. I feel like it's a long list of thank yous. We've all done a lot of work this year, and a lot of it is a blur. And so thank you for the opportunity to reflect a little bit on this last year. For many of us, it's been a roller coaster. Our company and our partners at 724 had just started principal photography on season 1 of a new series called Family Law. It's a new drama for global television and E1 that's shooting here in Vancouver. When the lockdown happened, we were 2 weeks into production on our first season. And thanks to the work of many people on this webinar who crafted new health and safety protocols, along with our producers, Dave Valo and Nicole Aguchi, we were able to return to production at the end of June. And I can now happily say that we have shot and locked all 10 of our episodes, which has been a huge relief for many of us. Our company's general focus has been on creating IP here in Canada. This series highlighted for us the value of domestic production. As we were one of the early series to head back into production, we were able to test new protocols and find a safe path forward. Fortunately, our series is a family drama and meets a legal procedural. We don't have a lot of stunts. We don't have a lot of crowd scenes or intimacy scenes, which sort of made it ready-made for our new realities. Our cast and crew were grateful to get back to work. They took pride in our Vancouver for Vancouver series, and they operated with so much respect and adherence to our policies and procedures, as well as taking responsibility for themselves outside of the workplace. I commend our cast and crew for prioritizing the health and safety of their colleagues, and credit them for the fact that we were able to get up and running with production without any major issues. I can tell you, up until March 16th, every minute I could detail. After March 16th, everything was a bit of a blur. I can tell you during the lockdown, we pivoted our company, LARK Production, to a staff who worked from home, and everyone focused their efforts on development. We also, like many of us, began to damage control in an unprecedented time for our industry. Wearing my CMPA chair hat, this year, we prioritized to focus on a wide range of COVID-related issues impacting our members. Like many of my colleagues here, we collaborated with our stakeholders in crafting health and safety guidelines in jurisdictions all across Canada. We sought government relief funding government relief funding for production companies to keep the domestic business active and people employed. And of course, we focused our efforts on the COVID-19 insurance issue for us, which is a major obstacle for many of our members to getting back into production. Insurance remains a big issue for many independent producers, as the federal government program currently only goes till March 31st, 2021, which adds to some new uncertainty for next year. As Prem highlighted, this year has brought into focus important issues around systemic racism, which extends to Canada's media production sector. The reality is individuals from certain communities face significant barriers to success and are woefully underrepresented in our industry, and we all need to do better. This fall, the CMPA ran a partial board election to increase diversity so that at least a quarter of our board of directors are made up of individuals who identify as belonging to underrepresented groups. We now have a new board makeup and are conducting a mandate renewal to provide recommendations to the board, moving toward dismantling barriers that exist in our organization and to ensure broader inclusivity across Canada's media sector as a whole. I look forward to working with all of my colleagues at the CMPA and many of the stakeholders here in BC to create a more inclusive industry. At LARK, as we refocused on development this spring, we committed to elevating voices of underrepresented groups, both within our organization and on projects and talent we work with, starting with our development slate, with writers and IP, so that we bring this perspective to our broadcast partners, but more importantly, to our audiences. We are starting by telling these stories. As new productions are upon us, we are committed to a set that is inclusive and representative of the world we live in. I am optimistic. I am thankful to the BC Provincial Government for supporting Creative BC and for the New Motion Picture Fund. This is an organization that I believe can lead us all towards change. I'm optimistic about the modernization of the Broadcasting Act here in Canada, which I hope brings new opportunities for domestic production companies like LARK. And I'm excited by the opportunities I'm excited by the talent that continues to break through in BC and look forward to future collaborations with our homegrown talent. I know there's still uncertainty ahead of us in the next year, but what we witnessed in the collective efforts to get back to work during this pandemic gave me great promise of our future. The community spirit and the unity is something I look forward to working together towards positive change. And I again thank MPPIA for bringing us all together tonight. With that, I'll turn the Zoom mic over to James Parody.
Thank you, Erin. First of all, I'd like to thank everybody for inviting me to this webinar tonight. I feel a little outgunned. I still wear a tool belt at work, but I'd also like to take this time to acknowledge that today I'm at the studio and I'm Zooming from the traditional land and unceded territory of the Kwantlen First Nations. And it's an honor for me to be here tonight. Brief background, I started full-time in special effects in 1992. So in 28 years, I've seen BC film industry grow incredibly. I've also seen some highs and some lows, more highs than lows, but I've also seen us grow into this massive, very successful sector of BC's economy. We employ tens of thousands of people. I think tonight it was said 60,000 plus people with spin-off from vendors and union and non-union workers. When asked tonight to reflect on 2020, I had to think to myself, yes, from the start, we came off 2019, which was a record year, both in wages, production, and non-union productions, to January, where it was all kind of on course. Late January and early February, fears were already starting with the global spread of the pandemic. And like everybody says, March 13th is a day like we'll never really forget. That was a hard hit. That was the first time. You'd always heard all these stories about these wildcat strikes and these types of things where you just literally put your tools down and go home. But we actually did. We put our tools down, we turned the lights out. We didn't sweep up, we didn't clean up, we didn't return rentals. We just all went home. And the uncertainty, that was a big part for us all to get around. I do understand that this was done with the commitment to ensure the safety and well-being of the film employees and their loved ones. The suspension of the production was also done to help minimize the stress and resources on the infrastructures around us. We're trying to do our part to reduce population density in our communities and daily activities in an effort to help reduce the spread of COVID-19. It was basically 6 months until productions were really back at it. In those 6 months, a lot of groundwork was done. And this is where I'd like to thank all of you on this panel tonight and all of our governing bodies. Between the unions, our producers, the studios, the studio lawyers, our government, local municipalities, they all had a hand in it. And it was a lot of work. The COVID protocols were written, the stage plans that were adapted, the implementation of safe work practices. I don't know how you guys dealt with the immigration of bringing our cast in so we could actually have something to shoot. Just even figuring out the maximum occupancy for our stages, our sets, our shops, the vendors, our storage, our trucking. It was a giant task. And I know that we all work together, but again, I just want to say thank you again for everybody's hard work and working together to get this. We are one family. I've always believed that we are one family. And that is why we are so strong and resilient here in BC. The next thing was education. We had to start to educate our crews on how we were going to implement all these new protocols, procedures. And that's not easy. I remember our first 10 Zoom meetings, half people couldn't even know how to turn on the Zoom. We've come a long way since then, but it's true. Like how many times we try to have a 200-person seminar and 80 people are interrupting, and you're just like, okay, how do we mute this whole thing, right? Having said that, all that hard work, we can't forget that, and I'm only speaking on behalf of IATSE, but like in IATSE, we had 9,400 plus members, and I think over 4,000 permittees that were out of work for almost 6 months. And yes, through government help and through production help and help from studios, we all have got through it. And that number doesn't reflect any of the production staff, the producing staff, the Teamsters, the DAGC, all of our non-union film workers, and our vendors that supply and support us throughout the year. This was a hard time for us. For me, it was not being able to see the loved ones. I was watching the general mental health of my crew go to an all-time low. I was watching the stress of my crew go to an all-time high. Finances are tanking. Friends are deferring mortgages, deferring payments on trucks, not paying their gas bill, basically putting themselves in a corner where, how are we gonna get out of this? But like I said, we are resilient, and here we are. Reflecting on some of the good things that came of this, the forced shutdown allowed us to reconnect with family life, and that was big. I think in film, often we work so many hours, we forget about our non-film life. So having a chance and being forced into reflecting on what's really important to us, what matters, and I think appreciating the human connection of our family and our co-workers that we often take for granted. I was lucky. For myself, I started back in July with a very small prep crew and management. And this was kind of a, I don't know how we were going to figure out how we were going to get back to work. And there was a lot of hurdles. We had to adapt a lot of the new rules. We had to adapt to everybody's family life. I mean, coming back, the respect amongst each other was incredible, because you're not just looking at a fellow grip or a fellow electric. You're also looking at, you know what? I got to give them their space. I got to stay in my pod, because I got to make sure his family gets to eat this week, because he hasn't had a check in 5 months. So the bond between the film workers is actually really incredible right now. Staying in pods, our new procedures for if we have a positive hit, I think we are setting ourselves up for success come the new year. I think we're at success now. I mean, when you think of where we were in March to where we are now, we are efficiently adapting to what is going on. We are proving to everyone that we are serious about the safety of our crews. We're serious about the safety of our cast. We're serious about getting this back on track. And I personally would like to thank again for all the hard work of everybody. And I'm very, very proud to be part of this family and this community for all the hard work they've done in the last 9 months. I believe we're nearing full capacity right now. I was reading we have 25 union productions currently underway, and last year, 2019, at this time, we were at 27. So that's not bad for coming out of the pandemic. I would say we're generally almost at full employment. Coming up on the holidays, I think it's a great time for us all to reflect. It is a time for us to be safe and ensure our hard work keeps moving us forward. It's an important time for us to heal. It's an important time for self-care. It is also an important time to get ready for the new year and all the good that it's ahead of us. Thank you again for everyone's hard work. You make me very proud. And now I'd like to pass it over and introduce our next panelist and speaker from the DGC British Columbia, Patrice Leong.
Thank you, James. Hi, folks. I'm a first AD. And that means I'm responsible for organizing the set and the long-term planning for each day of shooting. I started my career in 1982 as a gopher on Beachcombers. So that's how old I am. I was on a Netflix show when we got the word, March 13th, 2020. 1 week from going to camera, 80 shooting days, over 200 locations, and then we got shut down. It was a Friday, the 13th. In the weeks and months that followed, AKA the unknown, I was grateful for Netflix generosity and empathy. What started with 2 weeks' pay led to a few weeks more. They even cut checks for my trainee AD, who had not even officially started the show. This is a kind of behavior that engenders brand loyalty. In lockdown, I watched a lot of Netflix, created a home gym, cooked, read some of the best books of 2019, got closer to my younger daughter, cheered frontline workers precisely at 7, FaceTimed family, friends, acquaintances. I leaned into Que Sera Sera even as Netflix grappled with continuing our show. In May and June, I spent a couple of days each week churning out new schedules with newer start dates. Impending COVID protocols were incorporated into each new pass until the number of shooting days ballooned to 100. And then even Netflix optimism became untenable. They folded us. And it wasn't even yet the dog days of summer. As the days dragged on, ennui and hopelessness began to poke around, but my spirits were buoyed by the quiet in the streets, the smell of fresh air, and the camaraderie of an entire planet. In our neck of the woods, we were blessed with leadership, trial and error trumping inertia and ignorance. Federal, provincial, Dr. Bonnie Henry, the leaders and staff of all the film unions, guilds, and associations who organized and held town halls to help us wrestle our fears. The producers and crew of each show that took this pandemic seriously. Fast forward to November 13th, 2020, another Friday, the 13th. I am on day 28 of a 42-day shoot, a musical comedy for Apple. Did anyone consider that singing, dancing, and laughing might work against social distancing and airborne saliva? But thus far, the strict protocols are holding. Daily temperature readings, testing 3 times a week for those of us in the thick of the set, masks and shields, continuous hand cleansing, contact tracing, no scavenging of your own food at Crafty and Catering, social distancing, 2 persons per sprinter van, 6 persons per 25p, no cheering or hugging, even when Kristen Chenoweth, our Steadicam operator Jim, 10 other cast, 30 extras, and 22 dancer-singers complete a 360-degree musical number that climaxes with the dropping of a 50-foot banner and 500 balloons in one 3-minute shot. December 4th, 2020, day 42, our last day of shooting. Apart from a few individuals testing positive for COVID, we never had a major outbreak, nor did we shut down. I am incredulous. Our crew had a lot of 30+ year veterans. Read, Ulster's not into partying. Patty, our script supervisor, surmises the fatigue from working 6-day weeks also reduced risky day off behaviors. And with the exception of 2 shoot days in the woods, we were isolated on stages. Plus a little luck and the karma of our dead mothers. The ability to pull together, adapt to new situations, and keep moving forward is what has always excited me about film production. Kudos to the COVID response team members who, for the most part, had no experience with how we film folk work. They continually smothered our first world wines to keep us safe. Put your shield down, eat alone in a corner. They found ways to adapt to the peculiarities of our departments while still following Dr. Bonnie's guidelines. After hearing me swear whenever my microphone hit my damn shield, they personalized a shortened shield for me. Thank you, Mark. The early days of the fuzzy stick up the nostrils were particularly egregious until the nurses refined techniques that didn't make us want to punch them in the head. Thank you, Ben. All the protocols did grow tiresome, but the crew, flus, stomach and otherwise, were also non-existent, suggesting we keep some of those protocols during normal times. Our insular world opened up to folks filling new and uncharted roles. One of our testing schedulers was a rock and roll roadie whose tour had been canceled. A red zone shuttle driver was thankful for our 6-day weeks so she could keep her shuttered horse riding business afloat. Sadly, all the environmental gains we made while the world was in lockdown have been erased, if not worsened by the protocols. Less people per shuttle means more vehicles, more carbon emissions. Single-use packaging creates excessive waste, as do discarded masks and shields. I challenge any budding capitalists to figure out how to solve those issues. And for those of us who wear glasses under our masks, please, dear God, someone develop a defogging spray that actually works. As infection rates rise in the general population, test results for film companies slow as the one main lab struggles to keep up. COVID has exposed our societal vulnerabilities. We are all interconnected, no matter our differences. As one of us goes, so go we all. Thank you for inviting me to this seminar, and I look forward to seeing 2021. And now I'd like to throw to one of my favorite producers, Lily Huey.
Thank you, Patrice. Hi, everybody, and thank you for the invite to the town hall. I know Peter has asked me a few times, and unfortunately, time and restraints I was not able to attend, but I'm happy to be able to join this one. Reflecting on this year. So as everybody has mentioned, March 13th, Friday the 13th. Yes, I agree with James and Patrice. It was quite a day. It was, we were still filming. Everything was fine. We were lunch and I got the call at through lunch to shut down. Then it was like, okay, pack up everybody, return what we can. You've got a week. Then it came down to one day. On the Monday, it was like, nope, this is it. Last day, everybody shut down. So there was this, the crews kind of scatter. We did what we can. We called vendors. We weren't going to return anything. We were just going to, see what happens. I think it's the unknown that was kind of hard on everybody. I think at first it was kind of unreal. It was like, is this, how serious is this? Are we going, how long is this going to be? And I think as the weeks dragged out, it became very evident to everybody that this was a very serious pandemic that is worldwide, and we're all having to, deal with the consequences of a shutdown. For some of us, the shutdown was, working from home. There was still wrap out to be done for the studios. I work mostly for US based studios with a series that shut down on episode 20 of 22. So there was a lot of wrap still had to be done. Meanwhile, when that was going on, come June 1st, when it was announced that phase 3 means that the entertainment industry can try and start up again, came the phone calls and requests, of course, at that point of how do we return to work? And this is when we started the return to work protocols. So there was a lot of paperwork and a lot of discussions through the unions and through all the government agencies, our PHO recommendations, what we need to do. There was for us, there was a little bit of juggling between a show that is filming in Vancouver in BC and our BC regulations, our provincial and federal laws, as opposed to also then working in the US protocols that are from our US studio-based companies. What started out with a general kind of paperwork, this is what we would do, this is the protocols from WorkSafe, from what we need to do. We can, my unit manager and I, we sent out a 68-page document to the studio in LA, and then it came back, we needed more information. We went to 148 pages. We did some more revisions to 168 pages. And then there was a lot more discussions. And finally they said, we need more, and can you, get it done next day so we can review it. And so we came up with a 301-page document for return to work with lots of maps on how we would put people in shuttles, how we would have entrance doors, exit doors, throwaways through our stages, how we would be entering, exiting, and how we would social distance, all the protocols that would be put in place. So for one, I'd like to have a shout out and thank you to my unit manager, Stephen Merks, who sat in all these meetings with me while we worked this 301-page document out. So it was agreed upon with that, that we can now start back to work. So we did. And it was started out with Zoom. As James had mentioned before, all of us trying to figure out how to get on a Zoom meeting, how do you do a concept meeting with Zoom, production meetings, all of that stuff to try and work out. And then came testing and safety to go back. We started season 2 of our show at the end of September, and we were shut down for the first 4 days because our test results didn't come back for the crew. And our mandate is we could not go start work until all our test results for all the crew has come back, at least the baseline first test to be negative. So we waited, and I think, it was a learning curve for everybody with so many shows that was trying to start up and so many crews testing. The labs were running behind, and anything over 72 hours, was considered invalid results. So we would have to test again. So that went on, and finally we that facilitated a phone call from me to the president of the lab, and trying to figure out what timing, what can we do to speed up the results. And we finally got it going. And basically, we've been pretty good. And I commend our crew. We have a great crew who are very, very supportive of each other, who understands, who have families, who, we all care about who we are exposed to. So that has kept us going. We have tried to, limit the amount of background. Well, our show takes place in a small town, so we've been able to try to limit the amount of background day calls, just newer people. So we tried to stay with our standard crew. We did add more people to each department so that we wouldn't have as many day calls, that we would be able to facilitate the locations along with stage setups. And we've been able to have a very collaborative, creative team in LA, where we have been able to say, hey, maybe we don't have a giant airport with 200 people. Maybe we can have a smaller airport with maybe 40 people. So to try to limit those exposure to everybody, trying to work together. I can't say all the, changes can be made to, I wish it was kind of Grey's Anatomy where we can all wear a mask and, we can write it into the show, but that's not our show. So we're trying to adapt as much as we can. And we've been really, really good and really successful. I think we've had 2 kind of two or three about that contact tracing where somebody's exposed to somebody who's like 3 degrees down, and we've called the PHO and they're like, you're good, we check up on it. Some people have isolated, and we've been able to keep going, and we haven't had a shutdown since the beginning of the show. We are about to finish shooting tomorrow before our holiday hiatus, and we will have all those protocols again when we come back in January. And we'll keep on with our testing protocols, and we will hopefully keep shooting until our season is over in April. I think the harder part for the crew has always been just the stress. I mean, the stress is high in the sense of, yes, we've been good in the sense of keeping each other safe and keep going, but it's day by day. You really don't know if you're going to get that call where someone is positive, and who is it in, which pod is it in, do we shut down? So that, I think the mental stress on the crew is very high, and it, I think, maintains high until we get a better handle on this pandemic. And I don't think I'm not sure what we can do to help that out, because it is day by day. We just don't know. That part of it. So we try to keep the hours low. We try to keep the crews kind of just let them know we have cleaning crews that are wiping down the sets every minute so that they feel safe, that they're being taken care of, to help release that stress. And we'll see what 2021 brings us. That's kind of, we do have budgets for COVID. It has hit us, and we have like just making budgets was like our episodic, and then we have a separate COVID budget that just deals with PPEs, testing, all of that. That is just separated from, our production budget. And that's something that the studios are very helpful in that. And we'll keep on with what we're doing, and hope that 2021 brings us better results. But again, that's kind of our year so far on this show. And we'll keep on going. And I'm sure it probably mirrors a lot of other shows that are out there. And maybe on the more creative end, I will actually hand this over to a creative director for the DGC, Zach Lipovsky, who can probably give you a more on the creative side of how it's affected our industry. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Lily. Yeah, I have quite an interesting presentation to make to everybody that I'll try and do as fast as possible, because I know we still have a lot of questions we want to get into. I'm the National Divisions Director Chair, which basically means I oversee all matters to do with directors across the country at the DGC. I also sit as the chair of the advisory committee for directors in BC, so I oversee all the director elements at BC. And I'm giving you guys a preview today of a report that we're going to be releasing later this week that I think will be really interesting to a lot of you. Maybe in particular you, Minister, because you're just started your job. This will give you a really great snapshot of how the year was and where we're at moving forward. There's some incredible numbers in here that we've never seen before. There's some good news and there's some bad news, and I'm just going to race through it. If you want a copy of this report when it's released later this week, and you can email us at directors@ggcbc.com. This is a snapshot of the production numbers throughout the year. You can see that that black is the amount of productions that are in prep or shoot at any given week. So you can see we are around 345 before the shutdown, down to 0. And then in early kind of June and July, things getting back up to ramping up. That red line is 57, which is the highest record of simultaneous productions we've ever had. And we blew past that record this year. In late August, early September, all the way up to 70 productions in prep or shoot, which started to come back down. So kind of a remarkable year that we hit both 0 and also the most amount of productions of any kind. As far as who is shooting that stuff, obviously our town is a service town. 92% of what shot is US-based service work, which is great. Warner Media accounting for 25% of all television shot in the province, is actually down. Usually they're around 30%. Chorus was the only Canadian studio of any kind shot anything in BC. So CBC and Bell and Rogers were all absent, as usual. This is a graph of the last, since 2012, the amount of television production in the province. And you can see that we've been having record years, last year being the most ever. And it's dropped by about 34% this year, which is unfortunate, but we expect that to bounce back. Of that television that was produced, this is a graph of the percentage of TV being directed by Canadian directors. We have really focused at the DGC of how many Canadian directors are actually working. Unfortunately, this number's been dropping every year, basically, since 2012, with last year it being the lowest ever at 30% of television being directed by Canadians. This year it actually went up by 8%, which is great, mostly due to the travel bans and the quarantine issues with the DGA, meaning that Canadian directors were getting hired a lot more, which is good. This is a graph of the Canadian director representation by week. And you can see that we actually dipped down to 10% in February, where only 10% of the shows were being directed by Canadians, then all the way up to 100% and back down again to an average of 38. So we're hoping that as the next year begins, with the little boost that Canadian directors have had with the travel bans, that we'll be able to continue to grow that percentage up to 50%, which is our goal. This is a graph of how many directors each studio hired, a percentage of their work. And you can see that it's even though the average is 38% and we have Netflix and Universal and Warner Media above the average, we also have studios like Fox and Paramount and Legendary that hire almost no Canadians. And again, CBC, Bell and Rogers that don't even show up. If you get down by network, you can see that a lot of the lower budget networks, Freeform, Hallmark, Sci-Fi, Disney Channel, hiring Canadian directors at a much higher level because of the financial incentives. And the higher budget things at Disney Plus, Apple, Hulu, and TNT are hiring almost no Canadian directors or no Canadian directors. The overall number of Canadian directors working in 2020 continued to go down, and has been going down for the last 3 years. The gender parity has been really incredible. Basically, we hit parity this year as far as Canadian men and women working on shows. It was basically equal, which is a huge congratulations that should be given to the US service producers and studios. You can see here, this is a split by budget level. So in the 55 low budget episodes that Canadians directed, we had 10 women working and 11 men working. In the medium budget, 69 episodes, we had 17 women, 19 men. So you can see it's really as close down the middle as you can get. I mean, high budget, we had 5 women and 2 men. We expect that's because most of the men are coming from the DGA and from the US. This is a graph of gender representation by studio. And you can see that Warner Brothers actually achieved 50% parity with, I think it was 16 women, 16 men across all their episodes, which is incredible when they're also the largest provider. Some employers hiring only Canadian women and some employers hiring only Canadian men, sort of an uneven distribution. But overall, we hit parity. When you look at it by network, it's a similar situation where networks are hiring only Canadian women and some are hiring only Canadian men, with Netflix and CW right in the middle, closest to parity. In the world of MOWs, we saw some incredible numbers. Basically, they achieved what they said they were going to achieve, which is they intended to shoot every MOW that they wanted to shoot this year, and they did. They basically did not see a drop in production, even though they crammed them all in. So we hit, this is only counting November, we had 93 MOWs, which is the second highest on record. And so that's pretty incredible. Also, unfortunately, at the MOW market, their gender parity as far as gender representation of female directors has been basically flat since the beginning at 25%. And this is the first year where it actually went up with a 12% gain in 1 year. So hopefully that means that finally the lobbying for Hallmark and Lifetime and the other sci-fi, they're starting to hire more women, and hopefully that'll reach parity. This is the last graph, which is a representation of the diversity of the DGC's direct. This was self-identified, so it's not all our members, it's basically those we decided to identify, and compared to last year where we did the same survey. So the blue graphs here are how people self-identified, and the gray graphs are the population based on the 2016 census. So you can see that Caucasian representation dropped by 10% in 1 year, which is pretty remarkable. And so we're seeing a much more diverse membership working. The biggest takeaways from this graph is that in BC, we have a huge Asian population. 30% of the province is Asian. It's actually a lot more if you just make it the Fraser Valley. I think it's closer to 42%, but only 6% of our members, our director members, are Asian. So Asian filmmakers are by far the most underrepresented group. Also, Indigenous and Middle Eastern filmmakers were underrepresented compared to their population, whereas Latin, Hispanic, and Black filmmakers were on par or above their representation. So that's just a snapshot of this report that we have coming out later this week. So if you'd like a copy of it, email directors@dgcbc.com and we'll send it to you. And I just wanted to kind of finish off by just saying that, our creative talent in this province is a bedrock. We've had incredible numbers as far as production, but unfortunately those numbers haven't always gone over to our director members. So everything should be done to continue to kind of that boost that our director members got this year, because they were given extra opportunities they wouldn't have otherwise be given because of the quarantine. Anything that we can do to continue to try and build on that momentum would be really great, because when we have strong creative leaders, we have a strong industry. So thank you very much, and I'll pass it over to Peter to get as many questions in as we can before our time elapses.
Well, thanks, Zach. And thanks to all our panelists, Marnie, Erin, James, Patrice, Lily, and Zach. I think they all did a great job. There's nothing better to hear the authentic stories of what's really happening this past year. And I think we had some, great examples with our panel tonight. So really appreciate that. We've got some time for a Q&A. What we did is we got questions from our audience and other questions that came in. We'd like to see if we can answer a few of these. So why don't I get started? James, I'm going to give one to you. There was a lot of preparation that went into the safe return to work for the motion picture industry. Once you returned to work, what were the biggest surprises relating to the pandemic you discovered, either positive or negative?
What were the biggest changes? For us, was PPE. Some of it was almost ridiculous. Some of it was obvious. One of the things that's crazy is working nights in the pouring rain with a layer of rain gear on, wearing a gown over top with a mask, goggles, and then a face shield. It's almost impossible to work. But we're going to go through with it because none of us want to either harm each other or put a glitch in what we're trying to move ahead with. So that's just one example of some of the crazy little challenges we have. There's a lot of differences right now as well with just the way people are presenting to each other. There's a lot of respect because we want to protect each other. And I think we're taking it to our families as well. And our families are spreading it to their families and friends in school. So that's two little blips for you.
Great, thanks, James.
Hey, Peter,
Yes.
sorry, can I just jump in on that? I just
Absolutely,
wanted
Marnie,
to
go ahead.
say that to James's point, and I certainly saw Patrice shaking her head in agreement. One of the things that we didn't identify, and particularly me when I was trying to rush through my my opening remarks, was just the thanks and the crew and the people, the people of the crew. To your point, I remember standing many decades ago in the pouring rain at the GVRD. So to your point, James, it's hard enough to work in November in production, but working in November in production in a pandemic with PPE and face masks and glasses bogging up and technicians and artists trying to work like that. So huge kudos to the crew on the ground. It's not easy. We're all been very thankful in terms of the collaboration that happened to bring us together, but I just want a big shout out to the crews out there. So
Great, thanks, Marnie. Patrice, what were the biggest positives that came out of your experience working with cast and crew under the pandemic conditions?
I think after, it was a joy to go back to work because people were so happy to be back to work and be out of the house and to interact with other adults. And I think the protocols made for a more respectful and, as James mentioned, and quiet sets. It wasn't a fight to clear set. I would just have to say, yellow protocol, you gotta leave, to any kind of noisy actors that wanted to hang around, and vice versa. If I wanted to do a quiet rehearsal with the cast, I'd say red zone protocol. Sorry, folks, you gotta leave the set. So that was terrific. And the other thing was the cast and crew were united in keeping each other safe. Everybody was on the same page. So we all felt that we were working together. So those are some of the great things that came out of that.
Great. Lily, you mentioned keeping all the balls in the air. What were some of the biggest challenges in terms of just the additional costs as a result of COVID-19?
Well, I mean, for us, it was, again, we had a budget going into, season 2. Then it was like, okay, then what happens with, COVID? And there's a huge cost with, all the COVID protocols between the PPE, the testing, the COVID safety, officers, the health officers, the test, the screeners every morning. Everybody gets their temperature taken and screened, and you do that. There is a cost to that. But aside from that, one of the ways to try and keep crew safe, of course, is just to have more crew. That becomes your standard crew, like part of your core. So if your core, if you're suddenly your core department of 8 is now suddenly become a core department of 12 or maybe even 14, just so that you're not having to, because of the testing protocols, what the challenge is cost-wise is that anybody you bring in, they have to be tested, baseline tested before, they have to have a negative before they can show up for work. So you're bringing them in, and you got to test them, and then so you have to, there's no kind of like, hey, can we have a day call tomorrow? Because we can't, because they haven't been tested. So the last minute day calls, you can't, there's no ability for that. So instead, to help the crews out for that reason, you give them more in their core crew so that they don't have, they don't run into trouble of saying, well, I can't, I need more people. So that's going to be a cost. That's a cost of production that we bore, that we have to consider. So those are little things that we add to it. And there are, also with, locations and cleaning and just making sure there's a cleaning crew, making everybody feel safe in their environment, without being exposed to the unknown there is going to be a cost for sure.
Thanks for that, Lily. Erin, I got a question for you. I know BC Health did a fantastic job in keeping our numbers low. I mean, they're creeping higher now, like every other jurisdiction globally. But what other advantages does BC have over other jurisdictions with respect to the pandemic?
I think, well, for us, obviously those numbers were key for us to get started as early as we did, particularly with our production family law. But I think, a few of the panelists have touched on it, the wealth of talent here in BC, whether it's directors and what Zach pointed out, what we saw on the director side of things, and the talent that people could access who were here, who were in our backyard. I mean, on our show, for example, we didn't bring in any guest stars. We only had our 4 regulars who had been cast pre-pandemic, and everybody else was cast locally. So I think we just have such a fantastic crew and a wealth of on-camera talent that people are familiar with. I think the other thing is given what we demonstrated as an industry early on, I think it showed a lot of trust. I mean, Lily, I'm sure you were one of the early drafters of a 300-page document, and to put it into action. I mean, this is happening all over the world, but I think we were one of the first jurisdictions to get up and running. And I think that, really either Foreign Location Service or domestic production with our, our Canadian partners here relies so much on trust. And if you can't ship as many people from LA, or you can't send as many people to the UK, I mean, we've been doing this for so long with such a great group of people. I think that there are advantages, and as we're seeing with our numbers this last quarter, I think our biggest challenge will be what is to come ahead, because we're doing it safely, we're doing it well, and we've shown that we can adapt.
Great, thanks for that, Erin. Let's change questions here. Zach, have we seen any improvements with respect, I know you had your graph up, with respect to equity, diversity, and inclusion, or is it really too early to tell? I know it's a priority of the industry, but are we measuring?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have. I mean, Caucasian directors dropped by 10%. So that tells you that diversity increased by 10% in 1 year. Is the amount of movement we saw as far as female directors over the last, it was only 4 years, female directors were at 25%, and now they're at 50%. So it didn't take very long for the industry to grow by 25% in that zone once pressure was put on the employers. At the Guild, we don't get to pick who becomes directors, we just represent them once they get a job. So the pressure, I think right now, about inclusivity should be really shifting specifically from gender, although gender is important, to our BIPOC members, because they're the ones that are by far the most underrepresented. You know, we're doing that work with, because the good thing is all the employers feel that way as well. We've done a lot of work at the Guild with the Human Rights Tribunal of Canada to make it legal to actually have people self-identify for the purposes of employment, because until last year it was illegal. So that when certain productions have specific voices that they're looking for, we can help them fill those slots. And so we're seeing that growth, and we're doing a lot of reach with the DGC to the Vancouver Asian Film Festival and other elements of sort of underrepresented groups to try and train them and get them as accustomed to the industry as possible, so that they have as easy a path into the working industry, so that we can grow those voices that right now we don't have as many of, and make sure they have the opportunities to be as successful as possible. But the good news is we're already seeing the shift, and we're even seeing a shift as far as female representation with the MOWs, which has been flat, completely flat through all of the growth that TV's had. MOWs have been at 25% since we've been measuring. So the fact that they jumped by 12% in 1 year is again showing that the message is really getting to the employers, and they're the ones that make the decision. So we should continue to push them, but we should also celebrate them when they do hit those benchmarks, like they did with female Canadian directors.
Great, thanks, Zach. Erin, you mentioned your company is engaged now in equity, diversity, and inclusion in terms of the work that you're doing. Could you just maybe talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. Well, I think, you know, as I mentioned earlier, it is everyone's priority, and I think, you know, just like we saw with gender parity, there's mandates that came in on the Canadian programming side, because there's also government funding. Sometimes there's mandates associated with that, either with the broadcaster or with the government funding, in terms of disclosing that, and also just hitting targets. But I really I feel as though our industry wants to see this change. And I think there is, as Zach said, an intention, whether it's from producers or heads of departments or writers, that we want to be an inclusive industry. And I know, you know, for example, with family law, we had partnered with the DGC to bring in a paid director observer position. And we had hoped to have 3 on family law this season, which would be a position where ultimately those directors would come on to season 2 with us, but in season 1, it would be a paid observer position. Because of COVID, we had to minimize our numbers, but we're hoping that there'll be more opportunities with all of our organizations that we can do that with, and create more opportunities for everybody. I think it's early days. We've wrapped production, but I think it is a focus for us as we go forward.
Yeah, that's great to hear. Now, Marnie, I know you've, because working a little bit closer to Marnie at times, I know she's dealt with a lot of the hard questions right through this pandemic. So I got another hard one for you.
Thanks, Peter.
Are there minimum standards with respect to safe COVID protocols that should apply to all productions? And how is non-compliance reported and enforced? Is there a whistleblower policy, or how's that done?
Yeah, that is a tough question, but it's a super important question in terms of transparency, and back to what we've all been talking about in terms of all the health and safety protocols that we designed, and obviously all the studios and production companies have designed on their own as well. And the labor organizations, of course, as they need to be, we're very much a part of that. So you know, one of our biggest partners, and one of the things in terms of silver linings that I'm very grateful for, is the relationship that we built with WorkSafe BC. We already had it, but certainly through the process, and they have been with us every step of the way. And so there's obviously employer protocols, production protocols for health and safety. If someone is finding that they're not being followed, I would highly encourage them, obviously, to speak to your production or within your labor organization. But WorkSafe BC does have a tip line or a hotline for that kind of thing, so that you can call WorkSafe BC if you feel like your job site is not safe, and they will absolutely follow up on that. And you know, we want to obviously, you know, obviously all say positive things today. We have had calls at our production office. I don't work in film anymore. I work at the Film Commission. At the Film Commission, with inquiries about that kind of thing, and we do always steer them either back to the production or to WorkSafe BC. So there's absolutely health and safety protocols in place, and WorkSafe BC, I'd say, is the best bet.
Great, thanks
Can
for
I
that.
just quickly add to that, Peter?
Yeah, of course.
I've just anecdotally, we've been getting calls through the at the DGC through our anonymous line, but a lot of people give no specificity to which production it is. So they're calling to say, you know, my production designer is licking the doorknobs, but then they're not saying what show they're on. So there's nothing the Guild can do. So if people do use a tip line, just even if you want to stay anonymous, at least provide some information as to what show you're on.
Yeah, and sorry, I do want, that's very, want to say that with all of the work that we're doing with municipalities and communities, with our film commission team, you know, working so closely, and MPIA working so closely with our film offices, you know, and also hearing from the province, particularly as numbers were spiking, and we work obviously very close. I think everyone was concerned, or, you know, not that the industry was ever asked to shut down, and we shut down on our own accord to make sure that we had safe job sites. But overwhelmingly, what we're hearing both from municipalities, provincial, and from the provincial government is that they are seeing that our industry has been very safe. And, you know, I think we all spoke about it in terms of our job sites, but that's the feedback we're getting from film offices and from the community when they go past film for production or film sites, that we are seeing, you know, everyone can see that the PPE is being used, social distancing, all of those things that are not ideal to work in the rain in November, but people are doing them. So I just want to make it clear that obviously there is some, you know, we need to have a tip line for that kind of thing, but overwhelmingly we're seeing that for the most part, productions are doing a really, really amazing job at managing health and safety protocols. So
Great, thank you.
you're welcome.
Lily, question for you. I know that the cast and crew and productions have all really adapted in terms of safe protocols and everything, but have the scripts had to change at all?
We wish. I can't say all the scripts are. You know, it again, it's hard. I mean, I wish, like I said before, and what I said before, which was, you know, I wish we were all Grey's Anatomy and we can just write it in our scripts and we can all wear masks and it'll be great. It's not. And, you know, we have asked, and if it's possible, if it doesn't change the creative too much, they have made, you know, accommodations to help us out. It's like, you know, we have a restaurant set. It's like, so is the restaurant full? Do we have to have all these background? And be like, and the writers will go, no, actually it's before the restaurant opens, so let's have no background. You know, so there's a little bit of that to help that out. There are certain parts where, and because we're a small town, there are times when we say we can't do this. There's, you know, it all works out too with locations and casts and stuff. We, you know, we have a couple of recurring cast members that were US actors, so we do have to bring them up. And so scripts are being combined in the sense of like, and we're block shooting too, to help out in that sense. We do 2 episodes at a time. So it's like, well, instead of, you know, one here and one here, can we, the storylines with this US actor, can they be in this block so that they work the 2 episodes, but then we're blocking them so that the quarantine time is, you know, better. I have unfortunately one actor that's coming from New York who's in 3 different blocks, and he's in, fly out, come back, quarantine, in, fly, like there's a little bit of that, but we're trying to group things together to help ease all those difficulties. So yes, to some parts, but there are other challenging parts that just creatively it goes, because we're serial. So there's a storyline that carries through. So there are some parts that we just can't change, and we're just going to have to, you know, just work it out. And the crews have been great. I mean, our crew is wonderful. So we do try to just work it to the best of our ability, and the directors are great. They'll find ways, you know, to help out. And so, and we all chip in, and the writers have been great, and we all make recommendations. And so far we've been able to make things work. There are times we get a script and we pull our hair out, and then we sit down and go, okay, what can we do? you know, can we do this? Can we do that? And we make, and like I said, the writers will go, well, we can do this, but no, we can't really do that. And so, okay, fine, you know, so we get the best we can and we make the rest work.
Good stuff. Okay, I think we've got time for one last question. I can kind of open this up to a lot of people here, I think. But what have the biggest challenges been, and why don't we start off with Patrice on this? What have the biggest challenges been in terms of trying to secure locations in this pandemic environment?
Well, not so much the show I just came on, because we were mostly, as I mentioned, in studio. But one of the things that came up on the Netflix show when we were still thinking of going forward, we had booked venues that you're not allowed to, that we weren't allowed to have more than 50 people in anymore, like the Queen Elizabeth Theatre and stuff like that. And so, we're guided by the current health guidelines. So that's one of the big challenges of where we go, when can we go, how many people can we have inside, and also the use of what we like smoke. We're not allowed to have smoke anymore because it affects our respiratory systems. So I think people are truncating scripts to speak to the previous thing. I think scripts are being adapted so that if they use a location, it doesn't have to be 1,000 extras in one place. And I think one of the reasons that the Netflix show that I was working on did go down was because there wasn't a COVID pass. There were still references to 350 people at Queen Elizabeth Theatre and so on and so forth. And so that stuff had to be, I think, revamped. And that's why they sort of sent it back to be reworked.
Thanks, Patrice. And Marnie, you know, I certainly want to give a shout out to your team for the work that you've done with all the film liaison people around the Lower Mainland. And they've done such fantastic work. So maybe talk about that for a minute, and then we'll have to probably jump off.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, if we had another 15 minutes, I would name them all, but they have been amazing. And we were, you know, I'm thankful that we had those relationships prior to COVID. And certainly, you know, as you know, we know MPPIA works very closely with them as well. And our team at the Film Commission, as we were returning to operations, worked very closely with the film offices and their municipalities. So again, you know, they're connected to their communities, they're connected to their municipal governments in terms of advocating for us and making sure that as we, you know, go back into locations, and there's some that we, you know, are still not able to go into yet. And I think for the most part, what we're here seeing is productions are aware of that. We all understand that there's municipalities that, you know, are still looking out for their citizens and their businesses and municipal plazas and public spaces and making sure that everyone's safe. But we've been able to have those really, you know, candid conversations. And I don't know, you know, for say someone like James, have you noticed when you've gone into public spaces or municipalities or that type of thing for special effects? I mean, you guys are normally sort of in there first and looking to access various things in terms of the special effects department. What have you noticed?
Well, I agree with everything. I think what I've noticed is we're being more creative about how we're approaching locations. We're finding locations that are appropriate for the size of the crew, and we're adding prep and wrap days because the prep people aren't mixing with the set people like we used to. So we'll have to go in and 100% just prep a set. So we have to find locations that can handle us for not only our shooting days, but either maybe adding a couple prep days and a couple wrap days, because we're not going to cross-contaminate our crew. So that's become a challenge for a lot of our location managers and our scouts, is finding places that will accommodate that. It's also creative that they'll find somewhere that maybe is vacant, or that maybe we can block book for maybe a couple episodes at a time.
Yeah, and there, you know, there has been some opportunity for sure with some of the hotels in the Vancouver Convention Center and that type of thing that, you know, have reached out. And again, we've had those relationships, and I want to give a big shout out to the location managers, scouts, etc., that are sort of forging the way and the work that they did to make sure that there was really good, clear communication out to the communities when they saw a unit in their neighborhood or in businesses, to make sure that everyone understood what health and safety protocols the production was using to make sure the community was safe. So that's location managers have a tough go as it is, and have a lot on their plate. So again, it just shows the caliber of the locations team in BC.
Well, thank you so much, Marnie, and thanks to our panel. I really appreciate you being a part of this town hall tonight. And really thank you for your continuing contribution, and looking forward to a very interesting 2021 for the industry. And I really do see success, but obviously there's continuous issues and problem solving that has to be done. And I think we've got the right people on the job for that. I'd like to really thank Minister Mark and Bob Deeth for all the support and the provincial government support of this industry, and of course Western economic diversification and all the municipalities in which we shoot in. I'd like to also express our gratitude to all the organizations, the CMPA, MPPIA, the NPA, and of course the unions and guilds and the cast and crew for all the work that they've done in making this a success. It's a real team sport here. And lastly, I'd like to really thank Amber Orchard and Leslie Wooten, who are kind of the engine that keeps MPPIA going and put all these town halls together, and made a real difference this year. So really appreciate all the work they've done. So I think our time's up. So I'd like to wish everyone a fantastic Christmas, stay safe, and get some rest over the holidays, because we need you in 2021. So have a good night, everyone, and really appreciate you joining us.
Thanks, Peter.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thanks,
everyone.
Peter. Thanks, everyone.
Leslie.